Hello and welcome to the Society with Barrister Fatma Shaheen at PTV World. Now, ideally, everybody wants to adopt a very healthy lifestyle. They want to look good and they want to feel good about themselves. Considering that we now live in a very fast-changing world, the real question which arises in this regard then is the fact that how easy or difficult is it to do just that? How have our perceptions about beauty, fitness and health evolved over a period of time, more so when it comes to young people in Pakistan? And what role has media had in the same? This and much more we'll be talking about in our today's show. We'll also be deliberating upon the fact that when we talk about our ever-changing dietary preferences, when we talk about our ever-changing health and fitness regimes, when we talk about so many other things which one way or the other actually affect the way we perceive health and beauty in the society today, what are those most important things which actually make and break our perspectives on the same? This and much more to follow on today's show, and to do that, let me introduce you to my today's panel. My first panelist for the show today is Ms. Hania Rifat, who is a social activist. Assalamu alaikum ji and welcome to the show.
Walaikum salam, thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. My second panelist for the show today is Dr. Noor Dastagir, who is a consultant interventional cardiologist. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saab, and welcome to the show.
Walaikum assalam, Fatma. Thank you for having me over.
You're most welcome. And my third panelist for the show today is Jafar Abbas Saab, who is a nutrition consultant. Assalamu alaikum, Jafar Saab, and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. I would like to start the show with you, Ms. Hania. When we talk about young people in Pakistan, we all understand the fact that, they all have their own varied interpretations of outlook towards life, of their political ideologies and so many other things. But, when it comes to having their own health, beauty and fitness standards, how varied do you find the Pakistani youth in this as a young Pakistani yourself?
Fatma, beginning the answer, I think knowledge is very important. So today young people are very aware about what they have to do, what they have to eat, how they have to look. So in terms of knowledge, there's advanced and increasing knowledge, which is a very positive thing. Secondly, we talk about behaviors. So now young people are actually working and exerting themselves in a way that they look good, they look fit, and most importantly, they're eating good and they're healthy.
Right.
Thirdly, increased physical activity. Although many people might just disagree with it, but we have a global survey which says that after 1970 until the early 2000s, there has been over 30% increase in physical activity. And more so for women, which is even better.
Right. So, but when we talk about all these things, that things have changed over a period of time, and something which I have gathered from what you have said is that for the better, so to speak, people are more conscious now than what they used to be maybe a few years ago. Is this something to which we can attribute directly to media, or do you feel this is because of globalization, or what are the factors which have led to this change?
I think media would be a greater tool because it's more accessible. A lot of people are using it, irrespective of whether you're in a city, you're in a village, you have access to media, and media is projecting a lot of knowledge and information with regards to health. And you see these idols, young people idolize, elder celebrities, and you see them fit, you see them following particular patterns, and you're just likely to get influenced from that. So I think media has a great role to play.
Right, Ms. Hania, from what I have gathered, then I think it would be fair in those circumstances to attribute this to media, then that how media per se has led to our standards and our definitions of beauty, health and fitness evolving. But when we talk about media, what bifurcation do you make between the mainstream media, electronic media and social media, so to speak?
So I mean, electronic media was the first source. So we started getting this inspiration when we started seeing film stars, so to say, and them following particular fitness standards. But now the approach has changed, and the social media has an increased reach. So people tend to, follow Instagram models, health patterns and nutrition information that is very easily and readily accessible in social media. So today, I think a young person is more likely to get inspiration or to look up to social media and information emanating from that source.
Right, Hania. Point is noted, on which Dr. Saab I would want to come to. When we talk about basically media influencing the way we see health, beauty and fitness, so to speak, I think we must also talk about the fact that of late we've also seen this growing trend of young people adopting this culture of going out and having food outside rather than having healthy food in their homes. So as a cardiologist, where do you see the correlation between people resorting to eating out, eating unhealthy, and the risk of them developing heart disease?
As a cardiologist and as a clinician, seeing patients actually over the past few years, and I think over the past decade, we've actually seen a great rise of heart disease in younger population. So, and I feel that it directly corresponds with decreased physical exercise or sedentary lifestyle, and a lot of westernization in our eating habits, a lot of fast food going around here and there. And
So I think to what extent would you attribute this to media too? Because I think then something which he said would be applicable in your case too, because people are so influenced with this eating out culture, like you very rightly put out, that they are very okay with having a burger rather than eating something healthy, organic at home.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think media, in the case of people actually following more sick, especially young people, I think that has also played, unfortunately, a very detrimental role.
Yeah, exactly. I was actually about to say that myself, that I feel that social media has, unfortunately, a role to play in that as well, that a lot of fast foods and a lot of, like I said, westernization of the food scene over here, especially in Lahore as well. So I feel that sedentary lifestyle along with unhealthy eating habits, along with definitely other factors such as smoking, is contributing to a lot of heart disease in the younger population, and we're actually seeing people in the 20s now.
Right.
Which is very alarming.
Which is very alarming. But when we talk about, the trends generally, do you see these trends changing in COVID-19? Because, when we talk about COVID-19, a pandemic that we've lived through for the past 2 years and something which we are coming out of right now, do you feel that there's been a surge of such cases during the pandemic itself too?
So COVID was actually a double-edged sword for us. And actually internationally as well, because we've been following cardiology patients all around the world as well. And initially when the COVID hit, the patients actually stopped coming to the hospitals. I think that was because of the fear of the COVID and because of the isolation. So all the hospitals around the world, especially cardiac clinics, saw a major decrease in the patient influx in the hospitals.
Right.
However, we did in the end conclude some sort of association of COVID with heart disease as well. So COVID, although directly attributing and contributing to heart disease, but possibly because of social reasons, the patients actually stopped coming to hospitals, because especially tertiary care hospitals cater to a lot of patients that are coming from far-flung areas as well, rural areas as well, so out of Lahore patients as well. So I think since the traveling decreased,
so it was, more difficult for you as doctors to identify such cases per se, right?
Exactly.
Sir?
I think that's most probably the reason that we had a decreased number of cases.
When we talk about nutrition, I think a very important question which we must talk about is nutrition in Ramadan. So I think there are a lot of things on which you would want to enlighten us in this regard, because I think this is one thing which really comes into play when we are fasting. People want to fast, but they do not want their energy levels to be compromised, or for that matter, their immunity system to be compromised. So as a nutritionist, what advice would you give to them such that, they can strike a balance between all these things?
So number one, if your general dietary patterns are fine, during a fast, your immunity will not be compromised and your energy levels should also not go down. The problem that we generally see is that there are general unhealthy eating habits,
right,
which people are following, such as a lot of processed food, which Dr. Saab has also already pointed out, which is probably one of the key issues that we face, because as the amount of processing goes up, the nutritional content of food goes down,
right,
and it starts becoming detrimental to our health. So the first thing that I would like to recommend is that the food should be at least processed. So move towards whole grains. When we're talking about bread, move towards whole grain, multi-grain breads. Move away from refined flour, move away from simple sugars.
But when we talk about, having the right kind of a sahur and having the right kind of an iftar, so what is that, healthy snack that people need to have? Because at the end of the day, they can't, dehydrate themselves, they can't get their nutritional, balance down, because they have to, put through the whole fast, and it is a long fast these days, considering, it is kind of summers now. So what advice would you give to such people, more so to young people who fast? Because I, genuinely see them losing out on their energy levels very quickly during the day.
The reason for that is that most of the food that they're consuming contains a lot of simple sugars.
Right.
So what this is doing is that it's putting acute stress on the liver, and then insulin sensitivity is playing a major role in this. So there's a spike in blood sugar levels, and then there is a crash as well. So because of that, their body doesn't sustain the energy that it needs throughout the day. And this is also one of the problems that leads towards chronic health conditions such as type 2 diabetes and chronic heart disease. So if we can, and another thing to bear in mind is that we need to stop calling out macros on being bad for us in any particular way. All of them are needed in their particular amounts in a particular way. So if we talk about carbohydrates, in particular sugars, they're essential.
So how do you justify all these sweet cravings then?
So the sweet cravings come because we've kind of like trained our bodies and our gut bacteria to want those kinds of foods. And it's also sort of, it's comfort for us as well, right? It relieves anxiety, it gives you a dopamine rush. You want to then consume those kinds of foods in that particular period, though it is detrimental over the long term. And if we can correct our body cues, we won't feel like that anymore. Because
so how do you correct that? Because
so
I think this will be a very relevant question for so many people out there, because I think a lot of people complain of having these sweet cravings, more so even when they are fasting.
So we can do this by incorporating slow digesting sugars in our system.
Right.
And that comes from less processed foods. Now grains in general contain a lot of carbohydrates as well, but they are packaged in a way that first they have fiber, which feeds our gut bacteria, and then due to the fiber, the movement of nutrients from our stomach and our intestines to our bloodstream and then to our liver, it slows down. So this kind of like reduces the stress of processing on the liver.
And it also cuts down on the craving.
Yes, because now you have a sustained supply of sugars going into your bloodstream without a spike and a crash.
Right.
So you will feel satiated for much longer than you would on simple sugar. So brownie.
And I think a natural consequence of that would be that, you know, your sweet tooth temptation, that would also die
over
down.
time it will die down. And because sugar in a way acts completely like a drug, once your tolerance goes down, the amount of simple sugars you need to feel satiated also drastically
I think
drops.
Jafar, you need to train your body to do just that. I think expecting that this is something that will happen overnight
No,
or
it
just
won't
with
happen.
one fast, I think that is too unrealistic.
It won't happen overnight. It won't happen overnight. And this is why all changes need to be sustainable and doable.
You know, when we talk about social media, and this is something, a point on which I would want you to deliberate further, we see that there is a lot of potential on social media to educate people about health and fitness. You know, we have so many fitness apps now, and you know, so many Instagram accounts which actually give out people very healthy tips about looking after themselves. But then we also see that there is a lot of misinformation. So as a social media user yourself, more so as a young person in Pakistan, how do you feel can we ensure that, you know, when we use media, we do it in a way which educates us, and it is something which shouldn't fail us at the end of the day?
Like you rightly mentioned, there's a lot of potential and scope for misinformation. And the only way we can actually curb is that we tend to use our own mind as well, and we educate ourselves. So if you come across a simple slide which gives you a fact, a figure, it's important to investigate it yourself. You have access to the internet, and I'm sure if you do proper research, you will eventually end at a right conclusion. So it's very, very important that you don't just take things just simply and casually without researching on them and start adopting them. I will give you an instance of a diet that is being propagated on social media a lot. A TV celebrity actually came in and she gave an example. I was discussing this with Jafar as well, and it is a very unhealthy diet.
Which is it, the keto diet?
No, not even the keto diet, even worse than that. What? So you just have to eat 3 things over the course of 7 days, and you can't eat anything else. And people actually tend to follow it because it gives you like a 13 kg weight dropout.
Right. Jafar, I would want you to comment on this, that, you know, how unhealthy is it at the end of the day that you are made to lose weight so drastically?
It is absolutely terrible for your health. All fad diets, they will come with some sort of drawback, and it's not going to be good for you in the long term. You are missing out on so many nutrients. There is a particular fuel your body needs. And as a small example, if you have a diesel vehicle, you're not going to put petrol in it.
Right.
Why is it that we want to go to all sorts of extremes in our diet, but not follow the simple things that will make us feel good and healthy?
I think in this regard, she has raised a very valid point, that I think celebrities, then people who are in that position of power, people who have that, you know, power to actually influence people's perspective about it, they need to exercise that responsibility very constructively. They need to be very careful in what they are endorsing that way. Dr. Saab, I want you to comment on this too, because, you know, during COVID at least, and generally we see that that people in the society have a lot of, kind of annoying myths, especially when it comes to heart disease. So what are the most common myths that you have come across as a cardiologist in the course of your career? And I do understand that you had a very vast career, having worked both in a public sector hospital as well as, having your own private practice.
As far as we're talking about myths, I think first of all, the whole diet scene overall is actually somewhat of a myth as well. In my opinion, all these diets, and with all due respect to Atkins and ketos and everything, they're actually all, in my opinion, are all commercial gimmicks. Basically, what our body needs is a whole balanced diet. And it's a very simple thing as it to what you're consuming and what you're burning out. So basically, weight loss only comes from one thing, that is from caloric deficit. Not by reducing your fats, not by reducing your sugars, not by reducing your proteins, nothing. So basically, weight loss is only due to caloric deficit, which can be achieved by your normal diet which you're achieving.
Right.
So what actually they're doing is, with the name of, okay, we're cutting down on the carbohydrates, we're cutting down on the fats, what they're actually doing is they're just feeding you one macronutrient and actually pulling down on the calories, which is not made obvious to you.
Right.
You're being told that just take the keto or take the
But
protein
long
or
term,
take
it's
the
so
carbohydrate.
detrimental for you.
That's what I want to raise is, for the general public out there, what you actually need is, you need everything in moderation. So you need to cut down on the amount of food, not specifically any macronutrient per se. For example, even if you're eating a paratha, just Google the calories, that how much calories you've consumed one day.
Right.
And you need to know how much calories you need to cut down to achieve your specific weight goal, and then you need to cut down those amount of calories in whatever
So by
way
that
you desire.
definition, Dr. Saab, I think you have given us something very interesting to deliberate upon. I think by that definition, then having a sweet tooth or maybe having those cheat days, those are justifiable too, because you can on average, I think something which you were telling me earlier as well, you can on average have a healthy diet, so to speak, but at times everybody wants to have those cheat days and have those ice creams, chocolates and sweets.
So in a very, very simple way, to reduce 1 kg of weight, you need to cut down on roughly around 7,000 calories. So if on a healthy male person needs about 2,500 to 3,000 calories, so you need to understand that to cut down 7,000 calories in 1 week, say losing 1 kg in 1 week, you just need to cut down 7,000 calories in that 1 week. So if I'm even having any sweet dish or anything of that sort, so I need to know that now I've had the extra calories, so now I need to skip something from my next meal or reduce it substantially or eat a fruit for that meal.
Right, Doc. So you wanted to add something to what he was saying.
Yes, so while he's absolutely correct that a calorie deficit is what you need, one thing that the general public needs to be aware of is that calorie deficits need to be introduced once again in a balance.
Right.
Rapid calorie deficits will leave you feeling unenergetic, and you want that to be introduced slowly and steadily. And my recommendation on this would be that rather than introducing a rapid calorie deficit, if through exercise you tend to create a bit more muscle in your body, which and muscle has a higher nutritional requirement and other things, you will sort of start introducing a calorie deficit on the food that you're eating if it's still in a balance.
And I think in this regard, you must also tell us that when we talk about exercise, how precisely can that be inculcated in one's schedule at the end of the day? Because, when you're fasting, how can you ensure that, during your fast, if you exercise, you don't, go down on your energy levels, but post the fast, when you've had your iftar, then if you exercise, you feel very bloated. So what is the ideal advice that you would want to give to people in this regard?
Number one, I wouldn't recommend exercising on an empty stomach in general. You should have a bit of nutrients in your body when you start your exercise. And immediately after food, it's also not a good idea. So at least an hour after you've consumed something. And for Ramzan, my recommendation in general would be to decrease the intensity of the workout, but still work out so that the blood is flowing properly in your body, the nutrients are going into the right places, but you aren't stressing your body so much that over the course of the day, if you're not having enough food or enough nutrients, that your muscles and other things get damaged in the process.
Right. So basically your advice would be to tone down the kind of whatever exercise regime you do generally follow, because you will be going back to the normal post-Ramzan. I think, Hania, you wanted to add something to what he was saying.
Yeah, so what Jafar and Dr. Saab earlier mentioned, that you need to actually keep a lookout on your calories, and that's the best way to go about weight loss. So I think there's so many apps that I would like to introduce here that actually help you monitor your calories, so that you know that whatever you're eating, how much are you actually gaining from it. And if you want to go on a mathematical cut down on your calories, you actually know what exactly do you need to cut out. So these apps are there, and they're very accessible. So it's great if the public learns from it and actually make sure that they make use of them as well.
Generally, when we talk about our changing trends of going to the gym, going to health clubs, having that whole experience of having a personal trainer too, so to speak, that in itself has also changed over a period of time, more so because now people are also open to having their apps. So at the end of the day, do you feel that introduction of such fitness apps, watching all these exercises online, copying them, or for that matter, just does it give you that same zeal?
While it may vary from person to person, but I think after the pandemic, the situation has kind of cleared down as well. So gyms were closed, personal trainers could not come because of social distancing. Then people started to use fitness apps more so in the pandemic. And now it's very important to know whether you get the same motivation. So a person who has no past history of workout and he just wants to start, maybe it would just get tough for him. But if we're talking about somebody who is generally in a routine of working out, likes doing it, but for some reason, maybe in a tough work routine, is finding it difficult to go to the gym, or because personal trainers are really not accessible for everybody.
And they're expensive too.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, obviously it cannot be afforded by everybody. So these apps kind of give you an easy way out. But when you talk about the motivating factor, I think looking down on social media, you see 6-7 posts, people giving you the exact body images that you want. They are motivating. And then fitness apps give you an excellent opportunity to do economically viable exercise. You don't need instruments.
I think the stress should be on the economical viability of these, because at the end of the day, I think if it's something affordable, it's something more flexible for you, then naturally you can be tilted toward it. And then, like you generally rightly so pointed out, that at the end of the day, I think it's something very relative. I might not be that motivated to follow a fitness app, but you might be. On which, Dr. Saab, I'd want you to comment. When we talk about evolving beauty, health and fitness trends, there are reports to suggest the fact that when women have heart attacks, their symptoms are more vague, such as the fact that they usually suffer from nausea, back or jaw pain. They aren't generally as defined as it is when, men suffer heart attacks. So as a cardiologist yourself, do you agree with the findings of this report? More so, they also pinpoint to the fact that, when women have heart attacks, they are more seriously likely to get more ill.
There are two things to this question. First of all, I think I'll disagree to the fact that women don't present typically. Maybe the reason is that the only thing that could be is that they probably don't pay enough attention, maybe.
Right.
As generally, I think personally that women are probably more stronger of the two genders. I think they sort of ignore, they could be the cases that they ignore the symptoms, considering it might be something else. However, the presentation is quite typical. Like you suggested, that heart pain, which is called angina, typically present as a chest heaviness, which sort of more than even the left arm, which is presumed everybody has to be the most common presentation, is that it goes to the jaw. The chest heaviness going to the jaw is a very, very specific indicator of chest pain, which is called angina, and also can go to the left arm or even the right arm. So and it is often associated with nausea and sweating, like you just said. So these are actually the typical presentations of angina. And chest pain or any other symptom may be experienced very differently by males or females, by elder or by younger patients. So it's not the difference of the gender, it's just the presentation of heart disease varies all across the board.
So, this again raises a very important question. I think something which would really benefit people who are watching this show. Then what should be the measuring yardstick in that regard? Like, what are the symptoms which, if anybody suffers, he suffers, she suffers, or I suffer, which you as a cardiologist would directly attribute to us having a heart attack?
So there are two things. A heart attack is a very, very sudden event in which there is a complete occlusion of the vessel. It's very spontaneous, it's very sudden. You may be feeling absolutely well in your life, and that is what younger people have.
Right.
They are not having any severe arterial disease. It's just one event that happens very suddenly. So in that sudden episode, you can feel a lot of chest pain or chest heaviness.
Right.
which sort of, like I said, radiates towards the jaw, could radiate towards either of the arms.
Could also give you nausea.
Is often associated with nausea and sweating. So this is what a heart attack feels or sounds like.
So these are the symptoms that people need to look out for typically.
And the other avenue is angina. So angina is something which is more chronic, which people have for days or months or even years before they find out. They visit a cardiologist, you get some tests done, and you find out that you're having angina. So that is chest pain or chest heaviness on exertion, on walking or taking the stairs, or when your heart's workload sort of increases. So that is something that gives you time to visit your cardiologist. He sees you, he listens to you, he orders some tests, maybe get your angiogram done, find out what the disease is, and treat that in
time,
appropriate amount of time.
Right.
Heart attacks are very, very sudden. So you can't sort of predict them or preempt them.
Right, Doc Saab. But you know, in this regard, you must also tell people that when they do have a heart attack, what are those things, what are those series of events, more so symptoms that they need to look out for as they people, which actually could help them prevent that heart attack. So what are those indicators, what are those triggers of a heart attack that any person should be very careful about?
So definitely a person who's experiencing angina on exertion, having chest pain, chest heaviness, is more likely to have a heart attack.
Right.
As it is quite obvious that he has some disease going on and which is more likely to have a heart attack. Having said that, like I said, I want to establish it again that younger people having no specific heart disease, no pattern, no rhythm, can just have a heart attack all of a sudden. And that is where people like Jafar come in, where you need to have your primary prevention, not the secondary prevention.
Right.
You need to acquire healthier lifestyle so that you avoid that path. You won't get a chance, you won't have any indicators, you can just actually have a heart attack on one single day, in which for a person who's 25 years old, what do you believe that he must have been having? There are no alarm indicators in him. He can just all of a sudden have a heart attack, and because of the reasons that we've discussed previously, and that is where the primary
I think
prevention
that is
roles
quite
comes
alarming.
in.
I think that would also justify the more of young clients that you have, which actually fall in the same age range that Dr. Saab has pointed out, that, you know, 25 onwards. Hania, you wanted to add something to what he was saying.
So I think when we talk about healthy lifestyles, it is very important to bring in the South Asian woman's perspective here as well. So when we talk about lifestyle, it is important to zoom into how a typical Pakistani woman who is not involved in the formal labor sector or even in the informal labor sector, how's she living her life? So she is getting up in the morning, just feeding her family, staying within the house. She is not engaged in physical activity. So when we look at statistics and data, they suggest that how physical mobility of women is 30% less than that of men on an average, and that is alarming. So if women are not engaging themselves properly in physical activity, the risks of health related issues like Dr. Saab mentioned, heart disease, cardiovascular disease, and at the same
so
time,
many other diseases. I think that is such a valid point that you've raised, Anya, because at the end of the day, when we talk about, you know, evolving beauty, fitness and health trends, you know, I think social cultural norms, they have a very heavy influence on the same, because like you said, if a woman doesn't have access maybe to a car to go to a gym, or for that matter to go out play soccer with her friends, how can you expect her to be physically fit if her parents don't take her out, or if she's not allowed to go and drive and do the same? So we need to work on this in a very social cultural context. In which regard, being the only female on the panel, what recommendations, what proposals would you have for people who are watching the show, that, you know, when it comes to tackling such socially taboo issues, what are the things that we need to change in our societal behaviors to be able to allow women to at least, you know, have their right to health care?
yeah, so firstly, controls and checks on diet. It's very important that, you know, it's not that men can go out and have a proper access to nutritionists while women actually are feeding like parathas to their family, to their kids especially, and if there are little tidbits that are left, then she can feed on it.
Right, Ms. Hania. But coming to you, you know, when we talk about heart health, I think we must also talk about mental health and how both of them are actually correlate and coexist, because, you know, a lot of times I see that people who are patients of clinical depression or anxiety, they end up having heart attacks, and people who actually have suffered from heart attacks, they also can become possibly patients of depression and anxiety because of the heart attack itself. So how do you as a cardiologist see both these things coexisting?
I think very rightly pointed out by you, Fatma. Both of the diseases actually are correlated to each other and are interdependent. Let's talk on the mental avenue first. mental health disease such as depression. And just for the knowledge of the awareness of the public, depression is a clinical entity which is something that exists on its own. You might be having a very, very privileged lifestyle, having a family, all the money in the world, and still you can be suffering from depression. So depression is something on its own, not something that is a derivative of your social circumstances. So having established that, depression is actually because of the imbalance of a lot of neurotransmitters in the brain. So that imbalance has its effect on the brain, which is obvious in the form of depression, but it also affects the rest of the body as well. So there's a difference of one of the hormones, which is cortisol. A lot of people might have heard of it, and
it's a stress hormone.
It's a stress hormone. So increased levels of that stress hormone increase the hemodynamics and the effects that it has on the blood vessels, on the entire cardiovascular system, so that it sort of acts like a push on your cardiovascular system all the time, giving it, sort of putting it under stress and damaging your entire cardiovascular system. So logically creating a substrate for heart disease and the entire cardiovascular spectrum as well.
I think this is something which re-emphasizes the fact that when we talk about fitness, when we talk about being healthy, we need to be healthy both physically as well as mentally. But Dr. Saab, you know, when we talk about medications, a lot of times I also see that when, you know, cardiologists like yourself, they do give medications to people to treat their cardiovascular disease or heart disease, that inevitably also puts them in depression. We all understand that, you know, there are medications whose side effect is depression and anxiety at the end of the day. So how do you then, you know, balance both these conflicting interests? Because at one point you have to treat the patient, and at the other point you have to ensure that because of that treatment, this person doesn't, you know, become a victim of depression.
I think the key that is not to be missed is good communication with your patient.
Right.
So a lot of time my patients come to me with the very, very same complaint, and they're like, Dr. Saab, there's so much medication that you've put me on, I can't take it. I've not taken a pill in my entire life. Now you've put an entire page of medications, I can't take them. So once I go over them, and I was like, I generally am not a fan of over medicating patients at all, and let me tell you what each medication does for you. So once I explain it to them, just take 5 minutes extra of my time, and I explain what individual treatment is doing for them, and then they understand that, right, you're right, all this is important for me, so I'm not going to take them. Other than this, the disease itself can take a toll on the mind and the body, so sometimes you actually do need to put these patients on antidepressant medication as well.
Right.
So this is a very, very fine balance, and every patient is very, very unique, and you need to tailor the experience to that person specifically. So it's not just a rule of thumb.
And I think you need to constantly monitor it, perhaps work with psychologists and psychiatrists as well, have them on the team too. And this is something which actually happens. A lot of people don't know about that.
So in the modern era is all about multidisciplinary approach and teamwork. So patients fare well when a team is looking after them rather than one single person. Definitely two minds are better than one.
Right, Dr. Saab. But coming to you, Hani, I think we must also talk about, you know, in the rural areas, women's health is prioritized as, you know, men's health. And this is a reality that we need to accept, because when we are talking about the masses, when we are talking about the population, we need to target all aspects of it.
So in that scenario, it's important that these women, you don't necessarily need to go to a gym to be fit. You can have like healthy activities without instruments within your home as well. And it's important that our women navigate the internet and try to get hold of these techniques, these tips, and these little modes of exercise. So even a village woman can be exceptionally fit without going to the gym. It's just that she's aware of it.
And she needs to have access to the internet and social media.
More importantly, there's support groups. And this is very important for our generation and for everybody in the society to know that these support groups are available online. It's just that we need to become part of them to know which are healthy for us. And then, you know, group activities are always better than individual activities. So these group activities that are, you know, gaining popularity are very important, and I would most certainly recommend that, you know, we become part of these health support groups and try to improve our health and actually try to influence women around us as well.
Right. I think influence, and in this regard, I think it goes back to square one, working on media to do just that, especially when you can't reach out to people physically, although I think here again the role of community health and lady health workers, that also kicks in. But, you know, to conclude today's show, what would your concluding advice be to all the people out there, especially to young people watching this show, that, you know, when it comes to actually making your perceptions and your opinions about, you know, what is the ideal body type and, you know, what is the ideal body image, what is it that they must and must not do?
So what they must do is be fit. Take Uganda's example, so to say. These people are really fit because they're focusing on sports and there's increased physical activity. Now, this is what our young generation needs to do. They need to work out and they need to have a proper healthy diet. What they most certainly need to get out of is this ideal edited body image that is being propagated and projected on social media.
Right.
So there's no ideal body image. Wherever you're healthy, wherever you're comfortable, that is your zone. You should stick to that and be proud of it.
Right, Ms. Hania, your point is noted. But Dr. Saab, coming towards you and coming towards the conclusion of the show, what is that advice that you would want to give to people, especially when it comes to prevention of, cardiovascular disease? Because, as they say that prevention is always better than cure. So what are the lifestyle changes that people need to make in their lives today so as to be able to prevent, heart disease later onwards in their lives?
I think first of all is acceptance that heart disease is not a disease of the elderly now. So acceptance and then working towards a better future for ourselves is the first thing. Secondly, maintaining a very good, healthier environment for yourself in which you're exercising and being active, at least voluntarily keeping 30 to 45 minutes of activity, voluntary activity, not just that you say that I've been walking and I've been going over there and taking the stairs. Voluntary exercise 30 to 45 minutes per day, and lastly, improving your diet.
Right, Dr. Saab, your point is noted. But Jafar, coming towards you and coming towards the conclusion of the show, we understand the fact that, a lot of people use the holy month of Ramadan to actually fix their, eating disorders, their sleep routines, and generally to, improve themselves. So as a nutritionist out there, what advice would you give to people such that, they can make these fixtures permanent? Because at the end of the day, this is a form of self-improvement.
So overall, one thing that I would like to say is that all changes that we introduce, they need to be sustainable. Otherwise, the same thing will happen, that people come to me saying that we did a fad on an extreme diet for a while, then we gained our weight back or we didn't feel good. We should be feeling good from the get-go. And this can be done by the types of foods that we have. And the primary thing that I would like to tell the general public would be to stop having highly processed foods.
Right.
Move towards unprocessed foods, grains, whole fruits, and so on, and not to be guilty generally in the food choices that they make.
Right.
Food guilt takes you towards eating disorders, and that is a very negative cycle that also affects you mentally. And mental health and food are extremely interlinked.
Right.
Because our gut determines whether we move into a depressive state or not. And feeding our gut bacteria through good fiber helps us in ensuring that we are generally feeling wholesome, active, and have higher energy throughout the day.
I think at the end of the day, one thing we can't, stress upon enough is the fact that when we talk about fitness, when we talk about, good health, it is something which must definitely include mental health as well. Because, this is something which Dr. Saab was also saying earlier, that even when we talk about cardiovascular disease or heart disease, so to speak, it has a very strong link with mental health. On which note, I would like to conclude today's show. Thank you so much, Ms. Hania. Thank you so much, Dr. Saab.
Most welcome, Ji. It was a pleasure and honor to be here with you.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Jafar Saab, for being here with us today.
It was a pleasure being here. Thank you.
Well, to conclude today's show, we generally spoke about evolving health, beauty and fitness trends as they have changed in the Pakistani society over a period of time. We generally spoke about the role of media and how practically does it influence our perceptions of fitness and beauty. Having said that, the only thing that I would want to reiterate in today's conclusion is the fact that, we need to learn to love ourselves, because they very rightly say it when they say that, you need to love yourself first, only then everything else falls into line. On which note, I would like to conclude today's show. Thank you for watching The Society. Until next time, take care and Allah Hafiz.